According to the National Electrical Code, specifically Section 110.26 AON, the working space in front of electrical equipment must adhere to specific dimensions to ensure safety and accessibility for maintenance and operation. This section stipulates that the working space should not be less than 3 feet wide, equivalent to 914 mm, and must extend from the floor to a height of 6 feet 6 inches, which is 2.0 m. These dimensions are crucial for providing sufficient room for electricians and other qualified personnel to safely perform tasks such as inspections, repairs, and installations without being hindered by obstructions or inadequate space. Furthermore, Section 110.26 ATWA addresses situations where electrical equipment is situated in a dedicated space, meaning a space not normally used for storage. In such cases, the working space must be at least 30 inches wide, which is 762 mm. This requirement ensures that even in confined or specialized areas, there is enough lateral space for workers to maneuver and access the equipment safely. It's important to distinguish between the width requirement in 110.26 AON and 110.26 ATWA. The 3-foot width in 110.26 AON refers to the minimum clearance required for the entire working space, whereas the 30-inch width in 110.26 ATWA applies specifically to the situation where the equipment is in a dedicated space. Now let's consider a specific scenario involving a 20-inch panel located in a utility closet. This panel faces a 32-inch door, and the space between the front of the panel and the door frame is approximately 2.5 feet. The question arises whether this arrangement meets the code requirements for working space, assuming that when the door is open, there will be 30 inches of side-to-side space and 3 feet of space in front of the panel. To determine whether the described setup complies with NEC, we need to evaluate it against the requirements outlined in Section 110.26 AON. While having 30 inches of side-to-side working space may meet the minimum requirement for dedicated spaces as per 110.26 ATWA, the critical factor is the depth of the working space in front of the panel. In this scenario, there are only 2.5 feet of working space in front of the panel, which falls short of the required 3 feet mandated by 110.26 AON. Therefore, the working space in front of the panel would not be considered valid according to code. It's important to note that the NEC prioritizes the depth of the working space in front of electrical equipment to ensure that workers have sufficient room to perform their tasks safely and effectively. Even if the side-to-side space meets the minimum requirement, the insufficient depth compromises the overall safety and accessibility of the installation. Therefore, it is crucial to ensure that the working space in front of electrical equipment meets or exceeds the minimum requirements specified in the NEC to maintain compliance and promote a safe working environment. The reason the code requires this specific amount of working space relates directly to safety. Firstly, sufficient space provides freedom of movement. Electricians need room to maneuver, especially when handling tools and equipment. A cramped space increases the risk of accidental contact with energized parts, potentially leading to electrical shock or arc flash incidents. Secondly, adequate space allows for proper illumination. Good lighting is essential for identifying potential hazards, reading labels, and performing tasks accurately. Insufficient working space often leads to shadows and poor visibility, increasing the likelihood of errors and accidents. Thirdly, proper working space facilitates the use of safety equipment. Electricians often need to wear personal protective equipment such as insulated gloves, safety glasses, and arc flash suits. Adequate space ensures that they can don and off this equipment without being hindered by obstructions. Fourthly, clear working space aids in emergency egress. In the event of an electrical incident, such as a fire or arc flash, workers need to be able to quickly and safely evacuate the area. A cluttered or confined working space can impede escape routes, increasing the risk of injury. The NEC working space requirements are not merely arbitrary rules. They are based on years of experience and analysis of electrical incidents. By adhering to these requirements, we can significantly reduce the risk of electrical accidents and create a safer working environment for electricians and other qualified personnel. Remember, the code is a minimum standard. In some situations, it may be necessary to provide even more working space than required by the NEC to address specific hazards or operational needs. For example, in areas with high traffic or where equipment requires frequent maintenance, additional space may be warranted. The specific voltage of the equipment does play a role. While the 3-foot minimum depth applies in many common situations, the required depth increases with higher voltage systems. The NEC outlines these specific requirements in Table 110.26 AN. So, while in a typical 120 volts or 208 volts or 240 volt system 3 feet is often sufficient, a 480 volts or higher system will necessitate a greater depth. This increased depth accounts for the increased potential hazard associated with higher voltage systems, such as a greater arc flash boundary. There are also exceptions to the general working space rules. One common exception involves equipment located in residential dwelling units. The NEC recognizes that space is often limited in residential settings, and it provides some flexibility in the working space requirements for equipment such as panel boards and service disconnects. However, even in residential settings, it is important to provide adequate working space to ensure safety and accessibility. Another exception may apply to equipment that is completely de-energized and locked out. If the equipment is not energized and cannot be energized without removing a lock, the working space requirements may be reduced. However, it is important to follow proper lockout/tagout procedures to ensure that the equipment remains energized while work is being performed. In addition to the working space requirements, the NEC also addresses other factors that can impact safety and accessibility. These factors include illumination, headroom, and access. The NEC requires adequate illumination in working spaces around electrical equipment to ensure that workers can see potential hazards and perform tasks accurately. NEC also requires sufficient headroom in working spaces to allow workers to stand upright and move freely. And the NEC requires clear and unobstructed access to electrical equipment to ensure that workers can reach the equipment quickly and safely in the event of an emergency. When assessing working space, consider the potential for future expansion or modifications. If there is a possibility that the equipment will need to be upgraded or replaced in the future, it is important to provide sufficient working space to accommodate the new equipment. Failure to do so could result in costly and time-consuming rework. Also, remember to consider the location of other equipment and structures in the area. The working space should not be obstructed by walls, pipes, ducts, or other equipment. If there are any obstructions, they must be removed or relocated to provide the required working space. Another often overlooked factor is the presence of doors. The working space should be arranged so the doors do not swing into the working space and obstruct access to the equipment. If a door does swing into the working space, it must be equipped with a mechanism that holds the door open to prevent it from swinging shut unexpectedly. Many jurisdictions require electrical inspections to ensure compliance with the NEC and other applicable codes. During an electrical inspection, the inspector will verify that the working space around electrical equipment meets the minimum requirements. If the working space is found to be deficient, the inspector may issue a violation notice requiring the deficiencies to be corrected. The penalties for non-compliance with the NEC can vary depending on the jurisdiction. In some cases, the penalties may include fines, imprisonment, or both. In addition to legal penalties, non-compliance with the NEC can also result in increased insurance premiums and difficulty obtaining permits for future electrical work. Therefore, it is essential to ensure that all electrical installations comply with the NEC and other applicable codes. Working space is not just about the immediate area in front of the equipment. It extends to the sides and above, creating a zone for safe operation and maintenance. The 3-foot width requirement ensures that there's enough lateral space to avoid accidental contact with adjacent equipment or surfaces. The 6-foot 6-inch height clearance protects against bumping into overhead obstructions. Therefore, consider the entire volume of space surrounding the electrical equipment, not just the area directly in front of it. This comprehensive approach is key to creating a safe and compliant installation. Don't forget to consider the environment around the electrical equipment. Is it a clean, dry space, or is it subject to moisture, dust, or other contaminants? The environment can affect the type of enclosure required for the equipment and the need for additional safety measures. For example, in a damp or wet location, the equipment must be housed in a waterproof enclosure to prevent corrosion and electrical shock hazards. In a dusty environment, the equipment may need to be cleaned regularly to prevent overheating and equipment failure. The NEC also addresses the use of ladders and platforms in working spaces. If the equipment is located at a height that requires the use of a ladder or platform, the ladder or platform must be securely supported and must provide a stable working surface. The ladder or platform must also be of adequate height to allow the worker to reach the equipment comfortably and safely. It's also beneficial to document the working space dimensions and any potential obstructions. This documentation can be helpful for future maintenance or modifications to the electrical system. A simple sketch or photograph can provide a visual record of the working space layout. This can be especially useful in complex installations where there are multiple pieces of equipment and potential obstructions. When dealing with older installations, working space may not meet current code requirements. In such cases, it is important to evaluate the existing conditions and determine what steps can be taken to improve safety and accessibility. This may involve relocating equipment, removing obstructions, or installing additional lighting. Even small improvements can make a big difference in terms of safety and convenience. Also, consider consulting with a qualified electrical engineer or inspector. They can provide expert guidance on how to comply with the NEC and other applicable codes. They can also help you identify potential hazards and recommend appropriate safety measures. Their expertise can be invaluable in ensuring that your electrical installation is safe, compliant, and reliable. In summary, the working space requirements outlined in NEC Section 110.26a are critical for ensuring the safety and accessibility of electrical equipment. These requirements specify minimum dimensions for the space in front of and around electrical equipment, as well as other factors such as illumination, headroom, and access. By adhering to these requirements, we can significantly reduce the risk of electrical accidents and create a safer working environment for electricians and other qualified personnel. Remember that the code is a minimum standard, and in some situations, it may be necessary to provide even more working space to address specific hazards or operational needs. It is also important to consult with a qualified electrical engineer or inspector to ensure that your electrical installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. And always remember, safety first. Electrical work can be dangerous, so it is important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, follow proper lockout/tag-up procedures, and never work on energized equipment unless you are properly trained and qualified. By following these guidelines, you can help prevent electrical accidents and ensure that your electrical installation is safe, compliant, and reliable. Keep in mind that electrical codes are constantly evolving to reflect new technologies and safety concerns. It is important to stay up to date on the latest code requirements to ensure that your electrical installations are compliant and safe. There are many resources available to help you stay informed about changes to the NEC and other applicable codes. These resources include training courses, seminars, and publications from organizations such as the National Fire Protection Association and the International Association of Electrical Inspectors. By taking advantage of these resources, you can ensure that you have the knowledge and skills necessary to perform electrical work safely and effectively. In conclusion, understanding and adhering to the NEC working space requirements is essential for ensuring the safety and reliability of electrical installations. By providing adequate working space, we can protect electricians and other qualified personnel from electrical hazards and create a safer working environment for everyone. Remember to consult with a qualified electrical engineer or inspector to ensure that your electrical installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. And always prioritize safety when working with electricity.